My name is Rebecca Bromberg. I am a BodyMind healing coach and an integrative business coach. So I bring together all the different aspects of what I do into working with entrepreneurs, primarily mission-driven entrepreneurs. And I'm really interested in supporting primarily women move from survival mode, which does manifest very much in the body, into a mode of thriving. And so I'm really passionate about supporting people in moving from that place where we're being driven around by our unconscious conditioning so we can actually, live out our mission and fulfill our mission and get out of our own way.
I know that both you and Kelly have a way of putting information out there about lots of different things, but specifically the mind-body connection that I thought is so accessible and relatable. Yeah. And helpful, right? And so that's why I wanted us to all get together, because I know that anyone watching today is going to benefit from what you guys have to offer. And if you have not been on their sites, I highly recommend joining. And every single time I go on there, I learn something, right?
Well, yeah, so while we're waiting for Kelly, I could just, you could wind me up and point me towards anything, but I could talk about the 90-10 rule just while we're waiting for Kelly to join. Okay, so I don't know where things just drop into my head. I don't know where this idea came from, but it makes sense. So we know that 90% of our thinking approximately is happening below our conscious awareness. And then there's the 10% that's conscious that we're more aware of. So the 90-10 rule for me, in my experience, in just my own journey and in other people's, is that the first 90% of your journey, you're really working with the 10% of your awareness that's conscious, right? So the healing journey starts with talk therapy. It's such an important thing of talk all about it, right? Like your name. Because that's where, and you know this better than I even, where the ego lives, where the conscious self-concept lives, it's appropriate that we spend the first 90% working on what is at that conscious layer, because that's where all of our safety mechanisms are. So it's really important that we get okay with our trauma story, that we get okay with the places that we've been before that last 10% of the healing, where we're getting into the body. We're getting into the 90% of our unconscious that, the body is the gateway to the subconscious mind.
My technical engineer, my son, just saved me.
Oh, thank you, son.
Yeah. Yeah, he's gone. He's gone now.
Oh, okay.
But thank you for inviting me on. Hi, Rebecca. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Kelly. Really nice to meet you. And you might like to know that Cynthia's first live was with me, and she started with her camera sideways, and we were looking at her sideways, and she had to fix it. And everybody has the awkward first live.
She gave me the warning. She gave me the warning. She let me know the logistics. Which I appreciate. Thank you.
Yes. Now, so Kelly is amazing because she's actually in London, right? Yes. So her time is a little bit different from us. So thank you so much for accommodating our time.
Oh, wow. Your day is almost over. Yeah.
4 p.m. in London right now.
Yeah. So Rebecca had just introduced herself, and she was talking about the 60-20 rule, I think you were saying?
The 90-10 rule.
90-10 rule. So I'll let her pause for a second, and you can introduce yourselves, Kelly, and then Rebecca, please finish, and then we can get started.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah, so I am an osteopath, registered osteopath, and I've been practicing osteopathy for around 21 years now. But throughout that time, I've been taken on a journey where I've become much more interested in the mind-body connection. So I also practice coaching. So I offer wellbeing coaching to my clients, and it's all under the same umbrella. So people will come in and have an hour, 90 minutes treatment and have the body work, but they'll also have some coaching as part of the treatment session. I'm also pretty interested in BodyTalk, which BodyTalk really dovetails the physical manifestations, the symptoms, and what's true for people or what's going on for people, what the symptoms might be pointing to on an emotional level. So that's pretty interesting. And that's been a journey that's unfolded over the last 2 decades. So I've been interested in body talk for 2 decades, but I've only actually recently, over the last year, just been offering that in a very direct way to people. So I would use it as a point of reference, as a way to explore more of the emotional backdrop with people. But now it's out there, it's on my website, people are drawn to that. So people come in with a new expectation and they're ready to engage on that level. So people that I'm now attracting are very interested in this mind-body link and how their emotional narrative, the backdrop, may be influencing their physical symptoms, and how we can approach treating both simultaneously. Why not? Yeah, so
Right.
physical body work, but also looking at how people can improve their state of well-being on an emotional, psychological level, in terms of what's going on in their lives and how they can create space for themselves. So yeah, it's been a pretty interesting journey.
I love that. You do not look like you've been doing this for 20 plus years, by the way.
Oh my God. I really,
Yeah, it looks like you're taking your own medicine very well, Kelly.
Right. We're going to learn a lot today. So Rebecca, you can finish, and then we can kind of get into why we wanted to kind of bring all of us together today.
I was mostly done, but I'm glad to bring Kelly into this, because I have this sort of working theory that there's a 90-10 rule in healing. And like the first 90% of it, you're spending with somebody like Cynthia and talking about it with your conscious self-concept. The other aspect of the 90-10 rule is that 90% approximately of our thinking is in the subconscious mind, right? And so in that last 10% of the healing journey, we're getting into the 90%. So working with the body is catalytic. And, you know, I do somatic work. So it's working with a different kind of body talk, but really getting in touch with what the body is saying, what inner child, you know, beliefs there are. This is probably, I think we're doing very aligned things, Kelly. But that piece, it's like once people are sick of talking about it, and they're sick of having the insight and all the clarity, but no embodied change, then they come to one of us or both of us. And I think that's appropriate, right? Like it's important to know your journey before you heal through it, because healing through it, getting into the body is really catalytic. And so I just think we're part of like this really important ecosystem, working at different parts of that journey.
Yeah. And I can speak it from my perspective, because I think I came to recognize the importance of the body-mind connection outside of myself, right? Because clients do come and we do talk therapy, right? We talk about the unconscious stuff, the childhood trauma, how that impacts your behaviors, and we're looking at emotional regulation, behavioral changes, behavioral patterns, and different things like that. But it wasn't until I had certain clients where I started recognizing, ooh, this is way beyond just talking through the unconscious stuff, right? So it was a very specific client that came to me, and you could like literally, they would come with their fists just balled up, right? And just like tense and just like in a state of rage all the time, right? And so I had to really think differently about how I worked with them. And so it was from there that I started like really thinking about, I can't just do talk therapy and he's gonna be fine. Like, I need to do a little bit more to release some of the tension and stress and the psychosomatic experience that he had been going through all these years. And so when I think about my therapy and how I practice, I think about you guys, right? And I think about, I need to incorporate or help my clients learn that therapy is outside of me. It's not just me. It's me plus all these other services that are available. So for Kelly, if you want to kind of jump into it. So I had never actually heard of an osteopath.
Right.
Until I came across your
So
website,
osteopathy is,
okay.
oh, right. So essentially people come in with physical, mechanical complaints. So joint problems, joint strains, muscle tension, headaches, migraines, but obviously sports injuries, post-surgical, all of the traditional manipulative therapeutic type work we do will be working with the body in a very kind of direct way. But obviously when people come in, they are complete people. So they come in and they have other things going on, systemic conditions going on, emotional disturbances. But there's a whole range of stressors that people will be experiencing. So I think for any practitioner, over time, you get to a point where you're starting to broaden out your perspective, because you come out of your training and you have this baseline, this model that you're working from. But then as time goes on and you become more experienced, you start to engage in new ways, in ways that really work for on the client's behalf. So obviously they're coming in with these symptoms of stress, or they're talking about the stresses. They want that space to talk about the stress, as well as the back strain and the shoulder problem, and people become tearful. And so there are all these things going on. So obviously as a practitioner, you want to be able to hold that space for them and give them the opportunity to talk through what they're experiencing. And you start to connect between what's happening physically and what's happening emotionally, for yourself, but also for the client. So it's really about helping them and supporting them through a process of connecting the two and finding ways that they can engage on a physical level, which will help to appease and settle the stress response that they're experiencing, calm the nervous system, the sympathetic response in essence. So it's giving them really simple ways that they can go off and start to engage, simple breathing exercises, meditation techniques, creating space and time for themselves. The basic things that we can all let fall away when we're really under pressure, or we're really feeling diminished, or we're really feeling vulnerable. So it's just reminding them and creating an opportunity for them to explore that in a supportive environment. So that, alongside the physical work and the power of touch, as Rebecca, I'm sure, can attest to, the fact that you're working on settling and calming the body's biorhythms and soothing through touch, and stretching and opening and releasing the pressure that people are feeling physically, and that has an impact on the pressure that people are feeling emotionally. And if you think about the way that the body responds in times of stress and anxiety and depression, you can see the parallels between the physical experiences. You're nodding there, Rebecca. You see that in your practice, when people come in, and as you just described, Cynthia, when you can physically see when people are holding on and they're struggling, there are barriers, and they're defending or protecting, or just feeling diminished and low on energy. So it comes through the eyes, it comes through the posture, it comes through the facial expressions. For me, they're all just different levels of self. It's different levels of what we're experiencing on a core level. So it's all part of our truth. So why not use that to our benefit? So yes, we can work on a physical level, or we can work on a kind of communicative level, but we can also start to expand that out and just encourage an exploration which is just a little bit broader. It's just more tools for us to use and more ways for us to explore.
Yeah. No, I love that, because I feel like sometimes it's an education for clients, right? That at least when they start off with me, that the fight or flight, right? So I start very basic and talk about fight or flight and danger and how the animal kingdom and different things like that. And then that opens up their minds in a way that they've never thought about stress and how it manifests in their body, or trauma and how it manifests in their bodies. And so I wonder, for you, Rebecca, how do you support your clients? Like Kelly just beautifully stated, about helping them to find different tools, right, to work through the mind-body connection.
Absolutely, and I really do feel like I work at the interface between both of you, because most of my work actually is on Zoom. I'm not a body worker in that same way. I work with people in dialogue, and I'm more in the world of educating, right? And I educate on 3 different topics. One is how your nervous system control panel works. It's really important to learn the difference between sympathetic activation, fight and flight, and just understand when those different dials are active in the body and what to do to return back to a balanced and calm place. Sometimes it's self-regulation, sometimes it's co-regulation, reaching out to another. And then I teach reparenting. So it's working with the activated, unique, moment in time parts of us that need settling, right? So any part of us that is unsettled thinks that now it's happening, no matter when it happened, like the present. And so I always say that the present moment is like a time machine. And so I teach my clients skills that they can do to use their body to settle those parts. And so it's a dialogue between the mind and the body so that they can get some insight, but then do something with it in the body to transform that. And I also teach rewiring beliefs. So that you are not driven by your unconscious programming, right? And you actually can make conscious choices about the thoughts you want to have. The thoughts are happening as a result of our unconscious beliefs, and there's ways to speak to the body that help us repattern that. So those are my modalities, and I just feel like this bridge between both of you in that way. Yeah.
How do you
forever. I could talk about it forever.
Kelly.
I'm stopping myself.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Well, just creating a space, either facilitating that for somebody else or encouraging people to find ways to create a space where they feel more relaxed and they feel more settled. It lends itself to opening up and creating clarity on a mental level. So when we're feeling hemmed in and we're under pressure and there's the intensity of our sympathetic responses and our breath is up in our chest here and our tissues are really tight and compressed, that intensity is, when we release that through the physical body work, it really creates a more settled, clear space for people to find their own solutions, actually. So I think actually once you find, because a lot of the time we're facilitating that, we're holding that space so that people can explore in a supportive way their own truth. And most people know to a certain extent what that truth is. So just by supporting that and facilitating that and encouraging a broader exploration and bringing in new ways of looking at things and new ways of framing their day-to-day experience and their perception, that the physical work really helps to create a more open space for that to occur. So I find the two really go well together. And I find that the more people relax, the more people open up, because initially people come in and they just talk about the physical complaint, my shoulder, or it's my, my bowels, or, constipation. And I think, well, what are you holding on to? That bind or diarrhea and just being overcharged, and you can feel that in the system. You can feel, particularly from a cranial approach. So I practice structural osteopathy, which is the traditional manipulative type work, but I also practice a lot of cranial, the cranial approach, which is a much more subtle, gentle, releasing approach. So with the cranial approach, if you were to watch a cranial treatment, it's really just a laying on of hands, and we're feeling into the body's subtle rhythms and the way the fascia is held and the relationship between the parts. So for instance, if somebody falls and impacts the shoulder or the neck, you might find that there's a bind and a torsion that's running through the right side of the body, and the breath is held on that side, and they may be pinching a nerve and muscles at the cranial base. So just working to unwind the patterns, because these are patterns that have been superimposed on the original blueprint, that open, balance, disposition. So it's really about a lot of it is about letting go. Yeah. When you let go, you make space and you make way for balance to come through, and ease, and just raising the vitality and increasing the connectivity between the various parts. Because a lot of people, when they're stressed and they're under pressure and the sympathetic nervous system's really engaged, and there's a lot of charge in their system, a lot of the time it can create a lot of discombobulation in the body. So it's almost like the body's not really communicating. The head's doing one thing, the body's doing another thing, and it's just out of sorts. And sometimes just bringing that back into balance and feeling that connection and unwinding through the spine and the pelvis into the neck and opening up through the shoulder, you can literally feel the body going,
I
So
wish
it's
I
like,
lived in London. Oh my gosh.
I know, right?
I really want a
you know,
treatment
drop me a
now.
line next time you come over.
Next time I'm there, I'm coming.
But it's
So
amazing. It's really lovely. The cranial approach is gorgeous. People love it. I mean, yeah, because it's just it's easy. You lie down, close your eyes, and often I'll facilitate that with a kind of very simple guided meditation or visualization, and just invite people. A lot of the time, we're just not giving ourselves permission to relax and unwind and let go. So just to settle, okay, give yourself permission to relax. Feel the support of the table underneath your shoulders and your back and your head. Create space for yourself. Creating visualization, or I don't create the visualizations, I allow the person to guide themselves. I invite them to take the opportunity to take themselves on a visual journey. Sometimes I'll give a more direct visual, but quite often people have that special place that they felt relaxed, a memory, an old memory, or a kind of future image that they can go to where they feel relaxed. So they may imagine that they're lying on water and just floating and feeling really expanded and supported. And there's an emotional connection that occurs with that. So I like to play around between the physical release that I'm offering, but also I invite people to meet me in the treatment and just show up and be active in that process in very gentle ways. It depends on the person and what they're comfortable with. So yeah, it's a nice way to work. So the cranial approach is very different to the structural approach, and I often do the two together. So release joints, click joints, unwind, decompress, unlock joints, increase mobility, movement, but also cranially just unwind, unravel, decompress, and increase blood flow. And obviously some people prefer one over the other. So some people say, I'm here for the cranial. Let's get in and do cranial. But most people like to talk as well. Most people like to share what they're going through, or talk about the wins that they had following a treatment, and say, right, I felt so much better, and this occurred to me, or that occurred to me, and I've initiated this now. And it's just having that collaborative partnership, really, where they can come in and kind of express that the progress that they're making. So yeah, it's a lovely space to work in.
No, even the way you're speaking about it, right? I can visually, my body wants to experience how you're explaining it. It sounds so lovely and just so calming. If anybody has ever seen an osteopath, please put it in the comment section and share your experience with it. So
I actually have
I just want to kind of talk about, because I know that I've come across some clients that have been a little bit maybe jaded, right, about the mind-body connection, and a little bit resistant to treatment. So from your perspective, both of you, have you ever had clients who were just wanting to focus on just like maybe the body or the mind, or just one, and not necessarily the integration of both, right? Because I think there is a lot of education that comes with having to explain the mind-body connection is an actual thing, right? We're constantly living it on a day-to-day basis. Whether you acknowledge it or not, it's happening.
It's happening. And I mean, here's what's true about our world is that we, especially in Western culture, we live like this. We live from the neck up. And so, you know, bringing awareness to that. I mean, when I was 35, I went through this really intense life experience that dropped me into body awareness. And I was like, what is this? Truly. It was really amazing and intense, deeply felt emotions in my body that I had not been aware of consciously for 35 years.
Wow.
And so I have so much compassion for somebody who comes in, and when I ask, how does it feel to know this? And they look up and they say, well, I think, it's like, yeah, that's a sign of not being in body awareness. And that's really important to get into the unconscious. So just educating folks around the importance of cultivating body awareness. The more that you can tune into it, the better that you can be a client of Kelly's, right? Or of me. So yeah, I'll stop there.
How about for you, Kelly? Any experiences? Or do people come to you because they know exactly what you provide and they're ready?
Well, I've gone through this transition over the last 21 years. So initially, I came out, and my practice has changed so much. So typically, treatments will be half an hour, and that just wasn't enough time. But initially, that was the expectation. This is what osteopaths do, and we kind of, unlock the joints and stretch out the muscles, and there's a little bit of kind of exercise and advice that's given, and the initial consultation, that it will be much more kind of thorough. So we're going through the background in terms of systemic issues and history. But now I've actually changed my treatments. Well, they actually changed organically because people just wanted more time. So people were just not booking the 30-minute slots. They were going for 45 minutes, an hour. And now it's predominantly, even the 45 minutes have fallen away. It's the hour is the baseline, and people will go for an hour and a half. So they want that time and space, unrushed, talk about what they're experiencing, but they also want the time to have that, the hands-on body work and just be physically that tangible release, which facilitates the process of settling down emotionally and feeling better about yourself and feeling more open and feeling less discomfort and pain. So people really enjoy the two. So, but in answer to your question, Cynthia, in terms of resistance, I really don't. People come in with an expectation that osteopaths work on very mechanical models. So people will come in and are not necessarily looking for that engagement in terms of what's going on, what's the context, what's the backstory to their physical symptoms, where is that irritation coming from, where is that on a deeper level, where is that congestion and bind coming from, where's the emotional congestion and bind, where's the physical tension and the lack of ease, how is that reflected on an emotional level. People are not necessarily expecting that, although they are beginning to now, because obviously as people refer, people share what their experience has been. So, but if people come in and they have a very clear expectation of just having the joint adjusted, unlocked, muscles stretched, that's fine. But there's a conversation that happens as we're doing that. So that's fine. I don't push that on people. But often once you introduce the idea, particularly when I treat from a cranial perspective and I'm feeling the charge in the nervous system and I'm feeling the stress response, the diaphragm being contracted and the breath being up here, and the instability in their system, and so it's tangible. So I relay that back to the client, and they will all pretty much always expound on what I've relayed back to them. So it almost invites them to then, so by treatment 2, 3, they're already coming in. And so it's kind of changing the culture of what people expect, which I love to do, because I just like to be able to offer something a little bit different and just allow people to see how deep we can go. And obviously if people don't choose to follow up on that, and they're not ready for that, or it doesn't resonate on any sort of meaningful level for them, then that's fine. We just continue, and for many people it's enough just to work on a physical level, and they feel better, and they'll still come in and talk about feeling better as well as the physical release, and that's fine. But the large majority, more than 90% of the people that I treat, are very open and very engaged in looking at the kind of multi-leveled approach, and receiving support on both of those levels. It's refreshing for them, and they enjoy that. So I invite people, I kind of create a dialogue, and it's up to them to take it further or not, and that's perfectly fine as well, so long as we can move. And obviously people have different mindsets in terms of you know, what's true for them. So you're working with different schemas and different perspectives and different belief systems, and that's also fine. And I think it's for us as practitioners to be flexible and dynamic enough to be able to relate on different levels. Some people are very spiritual and very their language pertains to the energetics, and I can absolutely go there. And other people are much more scientific and much more orthodox in their approach, and that's fine as well. We can still talk about the relationship between the as Rebecca was talking about, the sympathetic nervous system, and how that, and teaching people about the links between the two so that they can see those connections and incite their own curiosity. So yeah, so it depends. It depends on who you're confronted with. Adults, I treat adults and children as well. So it just depends on what you're presented with. But I'm happy to be flexible and go at the pace of the person in front of me. So that's what keeps it interesting for me, because it's a journey. We don't have to unravel it and solve it all on the first session, and that's unlikely. It happens every so often, and that's great. But for most people, particularly if there's a history of trauma, emotional trauma, most of the clients that I see that are experiencing chronic inflammatory pictures and digestive issues and organ dysfunctions, there's often a long history of trauma, or a history of trauma that you know stems back into childhood, and things that people are dealing with, and the repressed and suppressed emotions that people are experiencing, and then something changes in their life. The support networks change, or the demands on them start to shift, and that can be triggering. So it brings up all of the stuff that they were managing, and they're now having to confront this physical manifestation of this disruption. So it really depends what's being presented. Some people are more open than others, and that's fine. But that's my role as a practitioner, to plant the seeds, and where they go, how they are taken is entirely down to each of the clients.
So definitely resistance is going to happen, but you meet the client where they're at, right? And then go from there.
Exactly.
Okay. Go ahead, Rebecca.
And I was just saying, I was just saying I have an osteopath story myself. I worked with a really gifted person. I just feel like what you do is you're magic workers because you're so integrative. And this person was highly intuitive as well as knowledgeable. And I had an issue where I couldn't put my heel down in down dog. You know, if you know that position, like and I'm a dancer, so I have a very flexible body, but my one heel wouldn't go down. It was quite painful. It was like this spike of nerve pain at the back of my heel. And I went to PT, I went everywhere because it was so painful. And eventually I saw an osteopath when I was traveling and visiting my sister, and he asked me a lot of questions that were more about my feeling life. And all of a sudden he went, aha, and he looked at this map of the Chinese medicine meridians and looked at the bladder meridian, which goes down the center of the calf. And he said, are you dealing with a fear? And I was. And he pressed on the acupressure point where the nerve goes through my calf, and the heel pain stopped.
Wow.
And he released it, and the heel pain came back. And the heel pain didn't go away until the fear became realized, like after my divorce. And then the heel pain went away. But he helped me understand the map to my body. And very much, there's a huge emotional interplay. It was life-changing because it just got me so curious about the meridians and the emotions in my body. And I really think the sign of a good practitioner, as you were saying, is empowering people with the curiosity and the tools to go study this stuff themselves, because that's really when we start to heal over time, is when we're empowered to understand how we're put together. And yeah, that was a big part of my journey.
That's amazing. So I actually had a question about what was your first introduction into mind-body connection healing, right? And so you kind of, do you have another story that relates to that? Because I'm
yeah,
curious.
very briefly. I went through a really painful divorce. This was like the pain went away after the divorce kind of happened. And my marriage broke up sort of suddenly 2.5 weeks before my yoga teacher training started. So it was amazing because I moved to a new city and it was like instant community, just like 9 women around me. It was beautiful. So that was an important component, was for healing for me, was community. But another piece was I would come in with a wave of grief. You know, you lose a partner and there's a big wave of grief that comes with that. And I would come to the beginning of a yoga class in that wave of grief. And by the end of class, I felt better. And I was like, what is this? And so it just got me naturally curious about the body-mind connection. And I was in a community where there are a lot of holistic healing people. I don't live there anymore, but I'm so glad that I got to live there because one of them introduced me to somatic therapy. And I went as a client, and it was life-changing to understand that there was this whole universe that I could speak to with the right support and tools. And so, yeah, I followed my curiosity until this point. Now I do the work in a different way, more from a psychoeducation point of view. But yeah, I'm passionate about the healing power of that body-mind connection. There's something about just reconnecting all parts of you to that higher self. Healing wants to happen when we get out of our own way, right? Like healing wants to happen. You were talking, Kelly, about creating that container, and it just happens. And same with, you know, you open up, you hold a safe space, and that healing happens. We meet in vulnerability when we get out of the way of that process. Yeah. It's so simple in its essence.
That's so true.
And how about you, Cynthia? What was your introduction to mind body connection?
I still feel like I am going through it, right? I feel like I definitely need to come to England and come to your practice. But I think, you know, simple things like meditation and yoga and actually doing the work of therapy actually has also helped me to learn more about the mind-body connection, right? I think sometimes you get into this work to help other people, and along the way, you end up like thinking, oh, wait a minute. I need to like take a step back and help myself a little bit more, right? Because I didn't necessarily come into the field as a therapist. I came in as a social worker, which is just like a little bit different. And so to become a practitioner or a clinician, there's a different mindset that you have to go into. And so I think I'm still on that journey for myself in my private practice. But in terms of my mind-body experience, I recently got into acupuncture. And my acupuncturist did the Chinese technique cupping. You guys, you know what cupping is, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like, what in the world is happening, right? Because I literally felt like she was vacuuming like all the stress and anxiety and everything out of me. Right. And it was such a visceral reaction for me because a few sessions, like I was like crying, just like, whoa, what's happening? Right. And so for me, that was a real actual reminder for me of the importance and the significance of the mind-body connection. And so ever since then, I've just been like, okay, there's obviously like for me personally, right, I have like a lot of stuff within the body that I still need to explore and become curious and figure out for myself. And so yeah, and I think this is why I'm so drawn to your sites when I come, and I'm just like, I think recently, Kelly, you did one on breaking down the different parts of the body, right? And explaining what each part of the body represents and what it needs and different affirmations that you can use. And so in reading something like that, and then I know I've talked to Rebecca a few times, and she's talked about, I want to say the wrong term, Hokami,
yeah.
Right? Therapy and different things like that. And so I think just being in the Instagram world, it's like opening my eyes to so much more, right? There's so much more to mind-body connection healing than just like meditation or mindfulness. It's so broad.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my journey is still continuing.
Yeah, but it makes it really interesting. And I think you're right. I think it's the same for me too, coming onto the platform and just seeing the breadth and scope of the way in which people are engaging and breaking down these concepts. I learn, I use it as a learning tool. I mean, it's an amazing space, and it's amazing for people who are embarking on that journey themselves to be able to connect with lots of different practitioners and take what they need and leave the rest until they're ready for that, or come back to that at a later date. I mean, it's really changed the way that people are approaching healing and the self-healing that's being initiated by a lot of people. It's empowering a lot of people just to see things from a much broader perspective. So yeah, it's interesting being on the platform and just seeing the different ways, and all of it's relevant. And this is what makes it so meaningful for people out there, because it's just what resonates for you in the moment, you know. And further down the line, that may change, and that's just part of the healing journey. You know, it's what we're ready for and what shows up and what we can use, and we use that information, we use that experience and that wealth of knowledge to then kind of open up in new ways. So it's a continue, bless you, it's a continue, you know, exploration, which is fantastic.
I think what
but I think
you guys do beautifully is just making it accessible, right? I think if someone can come to my therapy session and I explain it to them, and then they go on the platform and they read it or they see a video and they're like, oh, okay, right? Like it almost like it reinforces other information that they're receiving from other places. And so that's what I love about both of you and your resources.
Yeah, like we said, healing is hard. Let's be efficient about it, right? It's so important to give people the tools so that they can save time, you know. We've been learning over a long period in order to help folks, I mean, not go faster than their pace, right? You were saying earlier, Kelly, that it's slow is good, slow is safe, and that's appropriate, but not wasting more time than we need to. It's really important to be able to give people maps to understand themselves so that they can be empowered. And you can't do it all yourself. Self-healing is a little bit of a myth, but you can do a lot yourself. You can do a lot to make, like you can journal in between therapy sessions. You can get body aware and meditation to be ready for me. You can be ready to have a dialogue with Kelly. Like there's so much you can be doing in between sessions that accelerates your progress.
Yeah. Now, Kelly, you didn't tell your experience, and then we can, we have one more question until our hour is up.
So my experience in terms of what brought me into the mind-body connection. Well, I think the principles and philosophies of osteopathy kind of created the foundation for that. Looking at the body holistically. So yes, it's a mechanical model, but we're also looking at that. So the shoulder or the hip or the foot problem in the context of the whole body, it's one organism. So looking at how the adjacent parts either help or hinder the function of a particular symptomatic area. So that was the backdrop. But then I worked with, I worked with a homeopath who, a more experienced practitioner at the time. This is when I first qualified. So in the first year, she introduced me to the idea of BodyTalk, and she was using that in her practice. And we used to do tandem treatments together. Rosie, actually, she's a fantastic practitioner. And we used to treat people with chronic complaints or really difficult physical symptoms, and we tandem. So she'd treat homeopathically, and I'd tell her what I was feeling from a cranial point of view, and it may be one of her clients, so she'd inform me of the background, or vice versa, and we'd work together and amplify the results. So I was very much influenced by her broader perspective and her experience, and she introduced me to the work of Louise Hay. I don't know if you've come across her book, You Can Heal Your Life, and that was really instrumental. It was almost like a reference book for me. So 21 years ago, I was introduced to that, and I was using that. I was seeing that more and more show up in the practice. It came to the point where I could see people come in with physical symptoms, and it would give me a framework from which to work through in terms of what was happening, what was unfolding for them emotionally, and what it was pointing to. So it allows you to cut and go through, and it's a guide. But more often than not, people would confirm that, yes, I am experiencing, I'm having headaches, but I'm also feeling like I'm under pressure and I've got so much to do and I'm pushing and I'm feeling that intensity. And so we would look at the physical effects of that pressure and that emotional pressure, but also the physical effects of the ergonomics and sitting at a desk and working in an intense, with an intensity, physically, emotionally, you know, mentally, and working in multiple ways to release that pressure. So the work of Louise Hay was really influential in terms of me expanding that approach. And I was using her work very quietly. So people would come in and it would occur to me, but actually now I've moved into a space where I'm much more open about it and I'm really owning it. Just because it's just overwhelming, the amount of confirmation that I've had over 20 plus years. It's just too much confirmation to not bring this in and just be open and honest about these other perspectives that I find really valuable and really helpful. So people can take that or leave it, but I just felt moved to just stand in my truth. And it's not typically osteopathic, but actually it's a truth that I've seen unfold time and time again, adults, children, you know, so it's a gauge. It just, if the bare minimum that you take away from the idea of BodyTalk is just to stop and think, what else is true for me on an emotional level? Yes, I'm having these physical symptoms, but how are my feet? Just check in with yourself on an emotional level. If that's your only takeaway, it's a fantastic start. And it helps you to just expand in what you're able to, and how you're able to approach it on a multifaceted level. So you can start to do the things that you feel moved to do, or reach out to the people, professionals, friends, that you need to in order to begin to feel a little bit more supported, or just creating a space for yourself on an emotional level, and just taking time out, taking a step back from, you know, certain things. It depends on what's going on for you, but just to begin looking at what's happening on both of those levels. So yeah, so Louise Hay, the experience of looking at physical complaints and people coming in and describing the physical aspects of their pain, and often leaving out some key things like surgery, like trauma that they've experienced in the past, because they didn't think it's relevant. They just want to get to the treatment, and that's fine. So we get to the treatment and the conversation continues, and then lo and behold, you get the whole unfolding, you know, and it's like, okay, well, that's really relevant, and this is why. So you start to educate people and expand their understanding of what is true for them and how that's manifested and how that's showing up through them. So it's all relevant, it's all you, it's happening on at multiple levels, but it's all expressing your truth at a core level. So it's different ways in, which is fantastic, because you can go to a talking therapist and begin the work, and you go to a physical therapist and you can begin the work, and it's just different ways to interface with what you're experiencing, and to unpack some of those experiences, and just to join the dots. So there's probably been quite a few things that have influenced my mind-body connection. I think those are the two key areas. But the question would always be, why now? People would come in and you'd hear them say, all I did was bend down to tie my shoelace, reach for my cup of tea, get out the car. And so I felt compelled to help people find their way to that answer. Well, why now? I mean, these are benign things that we do day to day, brushing our hair, and suddenly, you know. So context. So for me, that's the question in my mind. Why now? What's true for this person now? And it's not for me to extract that. It's for me to encourage that. Well, quite often I find that there's a context of stress that might be unfolding, and stress can impact your body in this way. So I don't necessarily force or push for people to share or disclose their personal experiences, but I will share how stress can create a backdrop and a context for amplified responses, dramatic responses, more inflammation, more compression, more engagement in the nervous system. The nervous system controls the muscles, so more tension in the muscles, how that affects your posture. And people get that. So then they might begin to disclose either in depth or just in a very basic format. And that's also fine, but just to make the link. Yeah. But I think when people understand the link between body and mind, it automatically invites people to share more. Even if you, I mean, we've spoken a lot about the sympathetic nervous system, but there's the countering branch of the nervous system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is all about rest and digest and slowing the biorhythms and creating a more restful state. And there are very physical ways, and there are lots of ways that we can engage and consciously trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. And meditation has been shown to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, and that will have a countering effect on your stress responses, your sympathetic overcharge response. Massage, soft tissue work, touch, green spaces, anything that slows down your biorhythms. Breath work is said to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, chanting, singing, creative endeavors. And then that ties in also with the feel-good hormones. So you have serotonin, which is your natural and antidepressant and anti-anxiety hormone. And as you know, it's contained in many of the drugs that are used to treat depression. And dopamine, the feel-good, the happy hormones, anything that you're experiencing that's pleasant, you'll get a hit of dopamine. Praise from your boss, positive exchanges, verbal exchanges, walking out in the park, you know. But those sorts of things will bring on a kind of dopamine hit and raise your sense of joy and expansiveness and vitality. Oxytocin, which is released, it's the love hormone, so it's related to nurturing and touch and intimacy and intimate moments, and those sorts of meaningful exchanges, cuddling and just being in the presence of people that you feel supported by. And it's released for both mother and child during breastfeeding, and it strengthens bonding. So if we understand these connections to hormones, then we can actively engage in pursuits, creative endeavors that really amplify those feelings of well-being. So if we can, and also there's the endorphins, which are activated when we're exercising, and that's a natural painkiller. So it allows us to get past that barrier. So just by understanding that, we can ask ourselves the question, can I let people in a little bit more? Can I be more connected? And that can have an effect on how I'm feeling. Can I engage in a little bit more physical activity just to kind of boost how I'm feeling and the endorphins and how that ties in with the parasympathetic nervous system and settling. So there are very, very real things that you can do on a physical level, which will have a modifying effect on your mood and enhance your mood. So it's just understanding that more clearly, those interconnections, and using them to our benefit. It's often quite simple. It's not the whole story when it comes to healing, but they're like Rebecca was saying, there's lots that you can do in between therapy sessions, and these are all good reasons why meditation works, why swimming is helpful, why painting and pottering and getting connected and messy and just being among other people and just using the breath, finding time and space to just take a few deep breaths and settle and just tune in to how you're feeling.
And
so
it's a big part of, I think, what I'm hearing, and I've heard you say in so many different ways that we're all wanting to say, just to summarize, slow down.
yeah.
Right? Because we are all moving too quickly, and we don't have enough time to cultivate the awareness and the curiosity that we need to benefit from the things that you're doing. Right. And so I think that's the most important piece, is like slow down enough so you feel safe enough to connect. Slow down so that you can, you know, consciousness moves slower than our quick, sympathetic, limbic brain. And so slow down enough to be aware, slow down enough so you have time to meditate, cultivate a doing nothing practice. Do nothing for 10 minutes every day. Right. Yeah. When I tell people, like, with a resting block to do nothing for 10 minutes every day, they're like, but what do you do?
Yeah. And just sharing how potent that can be, it goes somewhere. It's as valid as the physical doing. And when you explain how that has a modifying effect on your system and your mood and your biorhythms and your state of restfulness, people get that. It's like, okay. And the fact that you find it extremely difficult to be still for more than a minute or 30 seconds is indicative of where you're at. In your head, mostly, you know.
And I'm glad you said that, Rebecca, because I feel like if you don't slow down, right, consciously, your body will find a way to slow it down for you.
Yeah, there's like, what is it? Listen to your body when it whispers so you don't have to hear it scream.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Listening is a skill we have to take time to cultivate. And so, if you've never meditated and you're listening to this, find a simple body awareness meditation. It'll change your life. It will. It'll change your life. It'll make you a much better client of any of us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just really quickly, this is a yes or no question, because we are running out of time. I feel like we could have done another hour of this conversation. Do you think that you can heal without the mind-body connection? Yes or no?
No.
No.
I mean, we didn't even just say it. We're both like,
no.
I was just thinking, well, maybe, no.
We can all do a collective no.
Well, it's impossible because we are mind and body. We are multi-leveled, multifaceted, and to negate one is to, it's just not balance. It doesn't make sense. And healing is about coming back into balance. Right. For me.
Yeah. We have another person that
heal without, and I don't think we can heal without the heart and the returning to who we truly are. Yeah. You know, the spirit piece of this, of even if you're not spiritual, you have a self, you have an essential truth of who you are. And so that's an important part of the collaboration as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I am so grateful, and spiritual therapy world just said it. I learned so much, right? And I want to thank you both, ladies. I feel like what you do online and in person is amazing. Both of you have this amazing spirit about you. I've never met you in person, but I feel like
it's happening. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah. It's an energetic exchange, Cynthia. Yeah, we're feeling each other right now.
Thank you. Kelly, you sure you have not done this before? You were amazing.
No, I did a lot of meditation before I came on, just so I was in the zone.
I think that you have, like, you're ready, Kylie. You're ready for, like, weekly. If you were thinking about it, you're such a teacher. Let's get that beautiful face out there if you want to.
My nervous system is ready for weekly yet, and this has been a fantastic introduction. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I really have enjoyed collaborating with the both of you. It's just been pretty perfect, and thank you. It's been a lovely exchange.
Well, whenever you want to do this again, we are here and willing. Now, so before we leave, do you guys have anything that you have coming up? I know, Rebecca, you have something coming up for your business. If you want to promote it here, please do so. And for you too, Kelly, if you have anything coming up, please let us know, or anything to look out for.
Yeah, just stay tuned for my next workshop. I do one every month, and I am enrolling in my program Finishing School, which is designed to teach you those skills of regulation, reparenting, and rewiring. It's a 12-week program, and if you're curious about it, take a look at the link in your bio.
And it's all on her website, too, or her page, so you can go on there. Kelly, how about yourself?
Yeah, I don't have anything specific coming up in terms of workshops. I work with people one-to-one, both online and in person, predominantly in person, but also I'm being called to work online as well. But just come and join in the discussions. There'll be more on my page about the specific complaints and how they, the symptoms and how they relate to the emotional picture, and just drawing those parallels, as well as just looking at the mind-body connection. That's my specific focus on my page. So come and say hi, connect, send a message. Let's get connected.
Yeah. No, thank you guys, ladies, so much. And I will definitely make sure to tag both of you in the video. And let's do this again before the year is out. I love the both of you so much and your work and all that you do. So I'm grateful.
Same. You bring so much too, Cynthia.
Yeah, absolutely.
You bring so much too, Cynthia. I appreciate you.
Much value.
Oh,
honestly, it's, yeah. I'm a follower. I've been following you for a while.
Enjoy your weekend. I don't know if England has a long weekend, but we have a long weekend here in the States. Rebecca, enjoy your long weekend.
Thank you.
And I will see you guys online.
All right, take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.